Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So today we are facing what I would call the second crisis of knowledge in Islamic civilization. So to understand what is going on, you have to understand the first crisis. So first of all, you must remember that the Quran starts with the words Iqra bismi rabbika allazi khalaq. It starts with the word read, and then it says that allazi allama bil qalam allama al insana ma lam ya'lam. So from the very first, from the start of Islam, Allah Ta'ala is the one who teaches people what they do not know, and the ink of the scholars is more precious than the blood of the martyrs. And there are so many verses and hadiths in the praise of knowledge. So you see, the Bedouin were very ignorant backwards. They were living in Jahiliyyah, and at that time they were very advanced civilizations of the world. So how did they become the leaders of the world in a very short time? And they created a civilization that lasted for 1,000 years as the dominant over the world. Well, you see, of course, Muslims say that Allah Ta'ala did it, but Allah Ta'ala always acts in this world by using asbab. So what was the sabab for this? The sabab was the search for knowledge. The Muslims had a unique feature in their deen, that our deen is about knowledge, about learning, about trying to, and that knowledge is the most important thing. It is far more important than all other things. It is the Adam alayhi salam was given knowledge, and then the angels were made to do sajda to Adam alayhi salam. So the virtue of knowledge is very high. Today we have become corrupted because of the Western concept of knowledge, that knowledge is something you use to earn money. So this is a very cheap knowledge. If knowledge is only good for earning money, then it's not, this is not the knowledge that Islam gives us. Islam's knowledge is, money is used to earn knowledge, not knowledge is used to earn money. Knowledge is much superior to everything else. Knowledge makes, Allah Ta'ala says that Allah Ta'ala and then His prophets and then the people of knowledge, these are the one who have honor. So this knowledge created a revolution. Today, why are we Muslims backward? It is because we have become ignorant. Today, in a nation in which you had nearly 100% literacy for 1,000 years. Why? Because every child was taught to read the Quran. This was part of the deen. So literacy was 100% automatic. Today, more than 50% of the Ummah is Jahil, cannot read and write. How? When the word of the Quran begins with Iqra, read. So, it's very strange how we have forgotten. The message is that Islam came as a stranger and will become a stranger. And so this is how it is. So the fact is that today, very, very strangely, the teachings of Islam provide us much, much better guidance than all of the libraries of Harvard on economics. But today the Muslims are not looking to the Quran and Hadith for guidance about economics, they are looking to Harvard for guidance. And Harvard doesn't have anything. They have ruined their own economy. How can they help our economy? So, what are some of the gifts that Islam gave to the world? These are some ideas that were revolutionary when they came, and they are revolutionary today, because even the Muslims have forgotten these ideas and nobody else has them. So, strength is not about trying to, it enables you to exploit the weak. Today, this is the major message. If you have strength, then you can take advantage of the weak. Allah Ta'ala says, no. If you have strength, the strength is meant so that you will use that strength to help the weak people. And the true leader is the servant of the people. Again, this is a paradoxical idea. People didn't have this idea. They had this idea that, yes, if you are the leader, then everybody is your servant and you exploit them. And you make them do whatever you want. So Prophet ﷺ said, no, the true leader is the one who serves the people. If you have wealth, it's not meant for you to enjoy and have luxury. Qul lil afu, whatever is beyond your needs, spend it on the others who are needed. Again, this is an idea which has been lost. We all as a society are responsible for everyone. Every child in Pakistan, every child in the Ummah is my child. So just as I am responsible to take care of the needs of my child, I am also responsible to take care of the needs of every child in the Ummah and every child in the humanity. Islam does not have discrimination against kafirs that, okay, let the kafirs burn in hellfire. This is unfortunately a common attitude among Muslims. No, every child is born in fitrah. And so we have responsibility. If they become adults and they are distorted, the hadith says that every child is born in the deen of Islam and then they can be educated to be Christians or Jews. But even if that is, they are our children, they were Muslims, and if they have become misguided, it is our job to bring them back with love and affection, not by killing them. These are the principles which created a unique society. Now, people say that, the West imperialized the world and Islam is like that. That's not true. The main difference is that in Islam, everybody was our brother, and anybody who said the kalima became part of the Muslims, and you find that you have rulers from all classes of people, and that's the difference. I mean, in the British Empire, the rulers were always the British. There was never any representation from anybody else. Even the Americans were not allowed to be participating even though they were the same race. And so that's why they had the revolution, that you're taxing us but you're not allowing us to be part of the ruling. So the source of strength of Islam was that Islam gave a unique knowledge to the Muslims and they became the leaders of the world. Now the burning question is, does this knowledge have any value for us today, or is it just obsolete? It was good 1400 years ago, and this is what the West says. Everybody recognizes the power of Islam. There is no question about it. It's a historical fact that Muslims came from nowhere and then they became rulers of the world. They created a civilization that is unparalleled. Even today, the strengths of the Muslims in terms of their integration, tolerance, harmony, allowing all the minorities to live together in peace, nobody has paralleled. Even today, people cannot do that. But the question is it relevant for us today? Now, the Western scholars, the historians, they say no. They acknowledge it was an excellent message. It was very well suited to its time 1400 years ago. But now times have changed. The same message cannot be useful today. Now, if you want to be leaders of the world, you have to follow the West. So that is for them to say, but the sad thing is that the Muslims agree that yes, this is true, our religion is now obsolete. Now we have to update it, modernize it. So we spent our lives pursuing Western knowledge. Now, all of you have spent many, many years studying this. All of this knowledge, think about it. Has it taught you how to live, how to become a better person, how to act, how to have love and compassion in your heart, how to forgive people, how to be humble, how to serve others? Actually, it has the opposite effect. Economics teaches you how to be greedy, how to be selfish. So, there was a deep Islamic living intellectual tradition which was developed for 1,000 years. We don't know anything about this tradition because we have been told that this is useless. Because according to the West, knowledge is only out there. They want you to learn about computers and TV and rocket ships. But what about what's in the heart? it doesn't have anything to say about that. Why? Because it's invisible. They say that only the visible thing matters. So Quran starts with Allazina yu'minuna bil ghaib, what cannot be seen. So what cannot be seen? What is there courage in my heart, or is there cowardice? Is there love and generosity in my heart, or is there greed and selfishness? These things cannot be seen, so they do not matter according to the West. And that is why their culture is coming apart. The families have broken down. The children are taught from birth. They play these games with which are called first-person shooters, where the children shoot other person and they watch the blood and the guts spill out, and they learn to enjoy this. So today we have the consequences of this. Every other day somebody picks up a gun and shoots 50 people, and he just enjoys this, and everybody watches and says, oh, how bad. And when will the next event happen, so we can all watch again this. So today the West has the solution to our problems, but Islam doesn't have any solution to our problems. This is what Muslims think. So now, what is the problem? This problem has occurred once before. It is not the first time that we are facing this crisis of knowledge. When the Arabs went out into the world and they got control of a large number of civilizations, they had then they encountered knowledge from Greeks, from Indian civilization, from Chinese, and they translated this all, and this was in the House of Knowledge created in the times of Khalifa Ma'mun al-Rashid and his predecessors. And when this knowledge was translated, it was very heavy. The philosophers, they talk about very complex and deep and difficult things, just like you are reading these days about Romer, and you read these massive differential equations which you are very impressed that, oh my God, this is really deep knowledge. So they were also very deeply impressed about these deep knowledge, and they said, Islam has nothing like this. Islam is very simple. It says very simple things. Everybody can understand it. So the one firaqa arose, which was called the Mu'tazila, and what they said is that aql is on par with wahi. So what is aql? By aql they meant that the Greek philosophy that we are learning, which argues things by logic and proves things by logic, this should be accepted as just being equal to wahi. And they had very solid reasons for this. They said, well, we use our aql to understand the Quran, so you can't deny the aql. So if the aql tells us something, aql is telling us that the Quran is valid, so if aql tells us something else is valid, then we should accept it. We should say this is on par with the Quran. So this was actually Harun al-Rashid accepted this religion, and then he enforced it over the Muslims. He said that everybody has to believe this, or else you will be tried and persecuted. Imam Abu Hanifa was persecuted and tortured for not accepting this. He said, no, wahi is not on par with human aql. But he was in the minority. Most people, either to avoid torture, they accepted this. I said, okay. Now, what happened was that for example, the Mu'tazilis said that ethics or the good is determined by our reason, and they said that Allah Ta'ala has to act according to ethics. Now this is, and they're putting a constraint on the power of God, because logic is superior to everything. Now they put it in a different way. But for the Muslim, and the Quran is a creation, and therefore it will suffer from death. Allah Ta'ala says, Kulla nafsin za'iqatul maut. So everything that Allah Ta'ala has created will be destroyed. So Quran will be also destroyed. So Quran is on par with human reason. So now the ulama said that no, Quran is the word of God, so it is an attribute of God, so it's not subject to fana. And according to the traditional, we cannot make standards of good and evil and apply them to God, because God Himself is good. So whatever it does is the definition of good. So there is no external standard that can be applied to God by human beings. So now what would have happened? Actually it was enforced, and Allah Ta'ala protected the deen. If it hadn't happened, then what would have happened is that, okay, we would have said, yes, this is part of deen, that the earth is the center of the universe, because that was the Greek philosophy. And they proved this by logic. And the Greek philosophy also proved that light comes out of our eyes and hits the object, which makes us able to see, instead of the reverse. And Greek philosophy also proved a lot of different things, all of which have been proven wrong. So, at that point, and actually all of these things were accepted into Christianity. They followed exactly the same process. So if Islam had followed the same path, today Islam would be dead, just like Christianity died. Because when science started coming up in Europe, they said, this is science says that Earth is not the center of the universe, and well, Bible says nothing about this, but the Christian religion had accepted the Greek philosophy, so they said, well, this proves that Christianity is wrong, and Christianity was defeated. If we had accepted the Mu'tazila fitna, which almost came to pass, it was the state religion, then Islam would be dead. Because Islam would be mixed up with Greek philosophy, and then when people realize that Greek philosophy is wrong, they would say, well, Islam is wrong. So today we have the same problem once again, in the sense that today Muslims believe that Western knowledge is on par with Wahi. In fact, worse. They think that when they see, and I can show you thousands of examples, that if what Samuelson says or what Romer says is against the Quran, then they say Romer must be right because he uses mathematics and there is no calculus in the Quran, so obviously Quran cannot be right. So no Muslim can say Quran is wrong, but what they do is they say, well, if there is a difference in the meaning, then they say the Quran didn't actually mean this one. It meant something else. So for example, there is a big debate. Initially, you see, the Muslim scholars, they rejected the idea of scarcity, because they said that Allah Ta'ala says, "Fadlillah," Allah Ta'ala's bounty is vast. So how can there be scarcity if Allah Ta'ala is giving everybody much more than what they need? So, but the scholars in the second generation, they studied in the West and they said, no, scarcity is the fundamental principle. So if the Quran says Fazlullah, it means something else. Scarcity is also a principle of Islam. Then they found some ayat and ahadith in favor of scarcity. So, and this has been the case throughout, that whenever you find, economics says man is greedy and selfish. So obviously the Quran tells us to be generous and to be kind and to give to others. But they found some ayat in the Quran that yes, man is greedy and selfish. Yes, Quran says that, but Quran doesn't say that this is the normal behavior or this is the good behavior. Quran says that yes, people have this tendency, but you should try to overcome this. But instead of looking at the whole message of the Quran, which is against the teachings of economics, the Muslims were so impressed with the West that they said, yes, the Quran is saying the same thing. So Allah Ta'ala says that in this, قُلْ بِفَضْلِ اللَّهِ وَبِرَحْمَتِهِ فَبِذَلِكَ فَلْيَفْرَحُوا وَهُوَ خَيْرٌ مِّمَّا يَجْمَعُونَ, that say, in this bounty which is the Quran and in this mercy that is Islam, let the Muslims rejoice, let them be happy, because this is much better than anything that the Kafirin has. But today Muslims don't agree with this. Today Muslims think that our Quran and our Islam is obsolete. It is 14 centuries in the past. Today we would like to have Einstein and Newton and the computers and the rocket ships and the atom bombs, and these are the things that are superior. So Quran says that what we have is better, but we believe that what they have is better. So Today actually people like me who say that no, today, even today, what Allah Ta'ala has given us is enough for our guidance. People get very angry sometimes at the seminar. They really become furious with rage. Why? Because they think that I am creating an obstacle to the progress of the Muslims. That if I prevent Muslims from studying economics and physics and chemistry, we will never rise and we will remain backwards. And so they become very angry that this kind of a position is very harmful for the Muslims. So we have to, according to these people who are the modernizing Muslims, we have to accept the bitter facts. We have been left behind in this race for knowledge, and now we must learn from the West to catch up with them. They don't understand that the knowledge of the West is poisonous. So, what are the causes of this crisis and what is the cure? The cause of this crisis is actually fake history. The West rewrote history and redefined their role, and they redefined the meaning of knowledge, and they turned what is good into bad and what is bad into good. And now we are living in an upside down world. Everything that we think is good, you see, everything the West says is good, even though it's very bad, we say it's good. Now, for example, democracy. All the Muslims think democracy is such a wonderful thing because West says it's a wonderful thing. Now, democracy is not the system of Islam, but now Muslims say that yes, democracy is Islamic, because if something is good, and obviously as Muslims we believe that Islam is good, then Islam cannot be against the good, so Islam must say democracy. And whatever the West says is good, we believe. So for example, the West says science is the greatest thing, so people say that yes, Islam teaches us to study science. So there was an experiment that if you put on reversing glasses, there are certain special kinds of glasses. If you put them on, the world turns upside down. The ceiling becomes the roof, and the roof becomes the ceiling. So people become very dizzy when they put these glasses on for a while, because they can't. They become nauseous. They have. But if they keep them on for a little while or for some time, for a few hours, then their eyes adjust. They start reinterpreting the image, and now with these glasses, what is this? They start seeing the world again upside down, because the brain interprets the image which is formed, and the brain learns to interpret the image correctly. Now, when you take the glasses off, then the world appears upside down. So this is the Western glasses. They turn the world upside down, and we all have them on. And so when we take them off and look at the world with our natural eyes of Islam, we say, oh, this is all wrong. So what the West teaches us is important is trivial and irrelevant. What Islam teaches us is important. The West says this is trivial and unimportant. What your lives are, whether there is akhirah, whether there is qabr, whether there is judgment, whether there is justice. No, justice is meaningless according to Western theories of knowledge. Morality is meaningless word according to Western theories of knowledge. Should you respect and honor your father or mother? Not necessarily. At 8, you can do this up till 18. After 18, you are free. So these are the things which, actually according to the West, it's a social decision. If we all agree to do it, fine, do it. If we all disagree, like in the 1970s when I went to the USA, homosexuality was a very bad thing. Everybody was thought that it was, and it was a crime, and you could be put into jail for it. And it was a psychological disease. It was listed in the manual of psychological diseases. People went into therapy to try to cure it. But now in the 90s, it is a normal condition. People are teaching about it in schools and offering these choices. Even the Muslims are being given this book called My Chacha is Gay, which the Muslim children have to read to show them that this is a normal lifestyle and they should not have hatred against this. And if somebody speaks against this, he can be put into jail. And now they have these gay marriages also. So it's a question of social consensus. If tomorrow we decide that killing each other is fine, then it will become fine. We can go and play first-person shooters in person. This is what they are doing. Somebody's student can come up and stand up and say, I have a gun, I want to shoot a few people. Let's do that. So he takes 3 people and shoots them. Okay, we all clap, say, wonderful. Tomorrow we will have another game. So if we agree to that, then this is fine. So this is a poisonous knowledge that the West has taught us. And one of these elements is Eurocentric history. Europe has taught us a history in which Europe is the only star in history. There is nobody else. Everybody else is a villain. There is only one good guy, and that is the Europeans. Everybody else is just stupid, ignorant, backwards, dishonest, lazy, incompetent, corrupt. And Europe, they have every good characteristic in the world. They are honest, they are efficient, they are competent, they have no corruption, and so on. So how did this happen? This was because of theft of history. There's a book by Jack Goody which is called Theft of History. He says that European historians systematically took creations and inventions of other civilizations and attributed them to the West, so that the origins and roots were lost. Europe has redefined the meaning of knowledge. The knowledge that they have is the best type of knowledge that anybody else has. The Japanese know karate, and the Hindu yogis, they can bury themselves under the ground and they can walk on nails. There are lots of very interesting types of knowledge. The Inca civilization, they developed the corn out of the poisonous plants. Tomato was, actually there's a class of plants which is called nightshade, which is poisonous, and if you eat it you can die. They developed this fruit out of it and they made something useful, which is making today the life pleasant for all of us, and they developed the corn which is feeding 40% of the planet, but nobody knows about this because of the theft of history. So they were master biologists. They crossbred plants, they took out the poison, they created these things which are feeding the planet, but nobody knows about this. And similarly, this theory of economics we read, this is the religion of the wealthy, and this is being taught and it is a very damaging, very poisonous theory. It helps to support the structures of power which keep the corporations making all the profits. Today, why do we see this massive concentration of wealth? It is because of this false economic theory which is used by economic hitmen to persuade us that the policies which are very harmful to us are actually favorable to us. So our planning commission and these people, they are all believers. They have been studying in Western universities and they believe these false theories and they misguide the whole nation. So the basic line of Eurocentric history is this following, that the sun of reason dawned in the West. People did not know how to think, and in Europe for the first time in history they learned how to think and reason and to reject superstition, and as a result of this, great scientific and technological progress was made in the West, and humans were liberated from these tyrannic and despotic governments, and freedom and democracy came into being, which provides respect and equality for all citizens. And then, since the Europe saw that we are the people with the light and everybody else is in the darkness, so then they took upon this as the white man's burden, that it's our responsibility to take these gifts and to spread it to the rest of the world. And so they went out into the world and they suffered. They left their homes and jobs, and they struggled and sacrificed to bring the benefits to us in India, the dark people living in superstition and so on, and in Africa, and they went to suffer and in pain. This is the story of Eurocentric history, which we have all learned and to some extent believe. So now we consider the real history, which is not Eurocentric. So first of all, how did the sun of reason dawn in the Europe? It happened all by itself? Well, actually, no, that's not how it happened, although this is suppressed in the European accounts. Actually, there was a very advanced civilization in Islamic Spain, Al-Andalus, which was there for 700 years. Now, remember that the European civilization has only been going for 300 years, and they are already degenerate. Now this civilization, 700 years, and then they had a decline and degeneration. Allah Ta'ala says in Quran that all civilizations rise and they decline. This was the major contribution of Ibn Khaldun. This was his analysis that civilizations also have periods when they are young and energetic, and then they grow old, and then they have these characteristics where they degenerate, they get involved in luxuries, and when they do, and that is the case in Islamic Spain, Andalus, people were living in very heights of luxury. They had forgotten how to fight and how to be energetic, and so the European tribes, they were barbarians. They were living in the jungles and they were fighting each other continuously. And they had energy and strength, and they defeated the Islamic degenerate civilization. When they did, they acquired a huge millions and millions of books in the libraries, which had Chinese and Greek and Egyptian and all sorts of contributions, and Muslims, of course. The Muslims had a major contribution. So all of these books were acquired. This caused them a stomachache. They could not digest all of this knowledge. It took them 2 or 3 centuries to assimilate all of this. The church set up, because many of these teachings were in conflict with church teachings, so they set up the the Inquisition. Anybody who taught heresy, which was coming from this Islamic civilization, they were tried and tortured. And all of the books that were published, they had to go to the church to get stamped that this is permissible, this is okay, this is acceptable. Nihil obstat was the name of the muhr, that there is no objection certificate they had to get in order to publish. One of the friends of Copernicus was called Sculptus, and he was tortured for 10 years for translating something from the Arabs which was heretical, considered by the church. He was imprisoned and tortured. So Copernicus, he did simple translation. He didn't have anything of his own to say. All he did was translate from the Arabs. Now we call it the Copernican revolution, and people say that this was the discovery of Copernicus, but actually I think it's Ibn Tusi was the name of the Arab astronomer, and he had all the mathematics and the calculations. And in fact, his diagrams are copied directly from a book which was found in his library. But unfortunately, it's not that he was dishonest, it's that he just could not acknowledge the Muslim source without being at risk for torture. So, and his case was like the case of many others. So people translated these books, but they never acknowledged the Muslim sources. And the crusades, which were taking place around this time against the Muslims, they created a lot of hostility to Islam. And so you could not mention Islamic sources. So all this knowledge that they acquired, and now the thing is that Copernican revolution was actually a Muslim invention. Cartesian coordinates, we all know about this. This was a great breakthrough in analytic geometry where diagrams were. Now the thing is, you look at all the works of Descartes, and there is no mention of Cartesian coordinates in anywhere, in any of them. So where did it come from? Muslims have been using it for many centuries before then. So they could not acknowledge that, so they just took somebody at random and they said, oh, Descartes invented it. And he didn't invent Cartesian coordinates. Analytic geometry was an invention of the Muslims. Similarly, Newton's book of optics is a direct translation of Ibn al-Haytham. And the laws of motion and gravitation, etc., these were all found in the Muslim civilization, and Newton acknowledged it. He said that to reach where I have stood on the shoulder of giants. What is not mentioned is these are giants of the Islamic civilization. Now the thing is that Newton did achieve something. I'm not saying Newton did not do anything, but Newton gathered and collected a lot of Islamic work, and he came up with something quite brilliant. Similarly, the technology that they have. There is a famous book by Al-Jazari called The Book of 1001 Inventions, in which he mentioned how to do technology, how to put things together, how to create machines, and this was the basic framework for. So all of these things were the sources of the revolution that emerged in Europe, but no credit is given to them for the Muslims. So they have two strategies. Either they invent a creator of this after the Enlightenment, or they say that this was invented by the Greeks and then the Muslims carried it to us. Both of these are false, and you can examine. What the Greeks had was, actually this C.K. Raju, the Hindu mathematician, he says, you look at the Greek arithmetic, it's the Roman numerals. He says, try to multiply two Roman numeral numbers, take 21 and multiply it by 73. You can't do it because it's just not possible. So how can these people develop mathematics? All the mathematics was developed by the Muslims. And the Hindus, they were also very good mathematicians. Calculus was developed in India and stolen by Portuguese traders because it was used for navigation. But today we say that calculus was invented by Newton. So Schumpeter, a famous economist, he wrote a book about economics, and he says that there was a great gap of 600 years in which humans didn't think about economics. So actually this was the period when the Muslims were dominant. And today, recently, people have found that a lot of things that Adam Smith has is copied from an Iranian school of economics, which was very strong and popular. So, but Max Weber in the 20th century, he says that rationality, the use of reason, is unique to Europeans. So this is the reality is something, and what is being said and what is believed, and this is believed by, unfortunately, not just the West, but by the Muslims as well, that they have brains and we are just stupid. So there are many things that are actually, the projection is very different from the reality. So if you look at the reality of democracy, you find that it has never been the case. But the image of democracy, the power of the people, this is great, very useful to fool everybody. Now today, you see, the vast majority, on a very large number of issues, like gun control, like going to war with Iraq, the vast majority of American public is against this. But although it is said that there is democracy in the USA, the will of the people doesn't dominate. The bottom 90% fortunes are going down, and the top 1% is making huge amounts of money, and the economic theory is used to justify and persuade people that this is the right. So today our list shows that Pakistan is among the 170th country in corruption, the bottom, and USA is among the least corrupt countries, and yet USA deceived its own people. It is established that they lied about the weapons of mass destruction. They knew that there is none, and they created this false excuse for war, and they spent trillions of dollars of public money in order to benefit a few corporations like Bechtel and the oil companies to capture the oil resources, and they destroyed a whole country, killed millions of people. How much more corruption can you have? Today, it has become much more clear, and even a recent poll of the US public says that the government serves the interests of the elite, not of the public. So democracy doesn't really exist except in name. So the story we have been told is that the Europeans went out and colonized the world in order to bring them the benefits of civilization. Obviously, this is false. It's just like the story which was used to conquer Iraq, that we are going there to bring democracy to the people, free them from a dictator, and protect the world from Western weapons of mass destruction. This is the story that was told, and the reality was that they wanted to capture the oil. And similarly, the Europeans benefited from their conquest of the world. They stole the riches. India was a very advanced civilization, much more wealthy than Europe at the time of the colonization. So basically, the Europeans have have a warlike culture. They have been fighting each other for centuries. For about 1 century there was peace in Europe while they were out conquering the world. Then when about 85% of the world was conquered at the end of the 20th century, then again they started fighting each other because they don't know how to live together in peace. So World War I, World War II, now they're talking about World War III. The people have this kind of barbaric mindset where they cannot even conceive the possibility that two civilizations can live together in peace and harmony. So Samuel Huntington, intellectual, he writes that now the area of time of nations dispute has gone. Why? Because the US is so far ahead of everybody else that nobody can fight them. So now what we will have is clash of civilizations. Well, why clash of civilizations? Why can't we have two civilizations live together in peace? Because they have been, for centuries and centuries, they have just been fighting each other all the time, so they cannot imagine it. That how people can live together in peace. So there are thousands of books, you can read them every day. There's a new book. Why is there underdevelopment? Why are rich countries rich and why are poor countries poor? This is the title of one book, and there are hundreds of books. Each of them proposes a new theory. So basically, all of the theory says that black people are lazy, they are dishonest, they are stupid, they are corrupt, they have bad culture, we don't have property rights. There are hundreds of theories. Timur Quran says something very interesting, that Islam gave us very good civilizations because we had good institutions. So because we had very good institutions, we were locked into this pattern. Europe had very bad institutions, so they could change. We could not change because we were good. We had good institutions. So this is a very silly theory, that because we were good, so we were defeated. So there are extractive institutions by Darun Ajmaulu, and so there are hundreds of theories. But the main theory, which is not mentioned, Stavrianos has written, that basically Europeans got strong because they were continuously fighting each other. So there was a military revolution in which they learned techniques of warfare which were much more advanced relative to the rest of the world. Then they went and conquered the world. They looted the rest of the world. They became rich. The rest of the world became poor. What's the mystery about that? You don't need to write a 1,000-page book to understand why some people are developed and some people are rich. And if a robber points his gun at me and takes my wallet away, then we ask, okay, let's write a book about why he is rich and why I am poor. What nonsense. So development and underdevelopment are opposite sides of the same coin. So the question is that, is Islamic knowledge relevant and important today? Yes, the answer is it is just as important today as it was 1400 years ago. Although Europe took a lot of our books and they translated, they did not get the real knowledge, which teaches us how to be human. So even what they took, science and mathematics, they did not understand. This is the interesting theme of C.K. Raju. He is pursuing mathematics and science, and he says that West has not understood, and this is true. If you look at this book called Chalmers, What is this thing called science? It is a current textbook used in Europe today, very popular, and he mentions 9 different theories about what science is. Why? Because they took it. This is an alien artifact. Yes, of course, they know how to use it. Science has made a lot of progress, but learning how to drive a car and learning how to manufacture a car are two different things. So what is at the heart of science, they do not understand today. So there have been centuries of mistakes continuing. Bacon thought it was about induction. That is, you look at facts and you find a pattern. Descartes thought it was about deduction. You use axiom and logic. Neither of these is true. The reality of science is that you look at the observable world to deduce the existence of the unobservable. You look at the pattern in the world and you find that there is God who created it. This is the reality. And similarly, you look at the falling apple and you deduce that there is the hidden gravity which made it fall. And you look at certain patterns and you deduce that there are atoms which combine. You can't see those atoms. So this is the reality of science. But the West, for a long time, rejected the idea that unobservables are important. because they rejected God. And they said, well, you see, God is unobservable, so if you believe in unobservables, you are out of science and you are going astray. So they never understood the meaning of science, because once you reject the unobservable, you can't understand science, you can't understand economics, you can't understand anything. Now, even now in Chalmers, he mentions that there is this realist theory. There is a minority which has presented that there is the realist theory of science. The realist theory says that there is the observable and there is reality which is hidden underneath, and science is about trying to find the reality. But it is rejected. Chalmers says this theory doesn't work. So the logical positivists, this is the dominant theory of science, even though it was rejected in the 20th century, but economists still believe it. And the Quran starts with allazina yu'minuna bil ghaib. So logical positivism starts with allazina yunkiruna bil ghaib. They reject the unseen. So, for example, in economics, we say that there is a preference which is in our heart, and this preference leads to the choice. We choose something because we prefer it. So the scientific method says, no, the preference in the heart cannot be understood because it's unobservable. We can see the choice, so that is what matters. Now, there are three things actually. There is welfare, what makes me happy. There is preference, what I like to do. And there is choice, what I actually end up doing. So these three are all different. It is possible that my choice is different from what I would really like to do, and it is possible that what I like to do is different from what I really should be doing. But in the West, there is only the observable, so they made all of these three things equal. This is the part of your economic theory, that what you choose is what you prefer, and what you prefer is what is good for you. Both of these assumptions, all two of these assumptions are embedded into economic theory, and they are both wrong. So logical positivism had a spectacular crash. Philosophers of science realized in the 1950s that this cannot be true, that you cannot work. The logical positivist said that we can do science without talking about electrons and gravity and unobservable in science. There was a very complicated maneuver, which was basically replacing the unobservable by the observable, just like replacing the preference by choice. So they said, if you have gravity, it means that the planet goes in an elliptical orbit. The elliptical orbit is the observable, the gravity is unobservable. So they said we can replace all unobservable in science by observables. Unfortunately, it failed. They realized it cannot be done. So the philosophers rejected it, but economists still believe it. And now the foundations of economics were built by Lionel Robbins on positivistic grounds in 1930s. And once logical positivism collapsed, they should have been recreated. Prior to Lionel Robbins, economists had a sensible definition of economics, which was called the welfare approach. It was concerned with how to produce welfare in society instead of scarcity. But welfare cannot be seen and measured. Scarcity can be seen. So, even though positivism crashed, economists continue to believe in positivism, and the foundations of economics and of econometrics are built on positivist foundations, and therefore they are wrong. So basically, economics today is built on false foundations which have been proven wrong. It's in the West. I'm not saying that the Quran proves them wrong. I'm saying that Western philosophers have understood that logical positivism is wrong. Economics is built on logical positivist foundations, so economics is built on the wrong foundations. But economists continue to believe in positivism, and they continue to do these wrong things. And Muslims are so impressed that they cannot even question what economists are doing. So today, when the Muslims see a conflict between the Quran and economics, they reinterpret the Quran instead of saying Samuelson is wrong, Romer is wrong. And now actually even the Western scholars are saying that Samuelson is wrong and Romer is wrong, because they saw that the effects of these economic theories in the global financial crisis, these don't work. So basically, from the Islamic point of view, the first question we need to ask is, what is the purpose of my life? It doesn't matter if you are an atheist or a religious person, first you have to decide, is there life after death? Is there judgment? Because everything that we do will depend on what is the purpose of my life. Economics, politics, our personal relationships. Without talking about purpose, you can't say what is good or what is bad. So now the economists say, no, we don't want to talk about purpose. Well, if you don't talk about purpose, how can you learn what beings will do? Because every human being is driven by purpose. So now what happens is that without talking about purpose, they assume purposes which are hidden underneath the text. These are unobservables, so they don't matter. But actually these unobservables drive our lives. So in the West, the goal of life is to earn money, to become famous, to become popular, to have power. There are 4 or 5 major things that are the goals of life. So now, so you should make them explicit. Okay, I'm after power. So now, how can we get power? Well, then we can think about how to use economics to get power, because they bury all of this under the text. So economics is is basically a system for supporting the existing power structures without mentioning it. It is like the economic hitman. It deceives people into thinking, well, this is objective reality, when in fact it is just a propaganda. So, regardless of whether you accept religion or you don't accept religion, to decide on economic questions, you must think about what are the goals of human existence, and then you can think about what the economic system will be that will help us to achieve these goals. Now in the West, they have started thinking that, okay, the goal of life is happiness. Fine. Okay, if you are going to say that life ends after death, then it's fine. You should pursue happiness. But they have found that happiness is not achieved by consumption. Happiness is achieved by character, building character. This idea that we just drink a lot of Coke and we will become happy, this is ridiculous. You can eat any kind of food you like. That is not going to make you happy. It is going to give you a temporary pleasure. But temporary pleasure is not the same thing as happiness. Happiness requires having the right kind of character. So that and to acquire character requires a different kind of training. And if you just pursue consumption, and if you are greedy and you are selfish, you can never be happy. And this is psychologists in the West have proven this. So once you set up a goal, then you can decide what the economic system will be to achieve this goal. But without talking about it, what they are doing is ridiculous. So we've discussed how the consumer theory of Islam is opposite of the consumer theory of the West. Basically, the economic fundamentals in Islamic society are based on cooperation and generosity, but in the Western society they are based on competition and greed. We have radically different institutions which are based on revolutionary ideas. The Western institution main financial is the bank, where every person collects money for himself and tries to increase it. The main financial institution in Islamic societies was the waqf, where anybody who has more than what he wants, he needs, he gives it to the waqf, which will take care of the needs of the whole society. So the waqf is based on the spirit of generosity, giving to others, providing social service. The bank is based on selfishness and greed. But now today the Muslims want to take the bank and make it Islamic. This cannot be done because the spirit of the bank is accumulation and greed. If you want to create an Islamic society, you have to build waqf as your foundation. That anybody, see, basically the question is, if you have more money than what you need, what should you do with it? Now the capitalist system says that if you have enough money to eat well and live well for the rest of your life, and you have 1 billion extra, you should try to make that into 2 billion. What a ridiculous answer. Now Islam says that if you have enough money for all your needs, and if you have extra, then spend it on others who are in need. So this is an entirely different answer from the one which is given in your economics textbook. The economics doesn't tell you that spend the excess over needs, because the economics says that your needs are insatiable. They never finish. Halanki, that's not true. Our needs are limited. It's only the wants that are unlimited. So we need to wake up. according to the standard ideas, Islam is no longer complete. Allah Ta'ala says that Islam is perfect and complete. Al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum wa atmamtu alaykum ni'mati wa razitu lakum al-islam dina. Allah Ta'ala made this religion which is complete and perfect. But today the Ummah thinks that it is not complete. Allah Ta'ala didn't teach us biology, didn't give us chemistry, didn't give us physics. So it's very deficient. And also, it is not perfect. Allah Ta'ala made some laws which were wrong. He prohibited interest. He said that slavery is allowed. He said that you can have 4 marriages. These are all wrong. And we should fix the defects in the religion so that we get perfect religion. So today, unfortunately, we have become slaves of Western thought, and we are not willing to look at a religion which is even today, 1400 years ago, even though it was revealed 1400, it still provides perfect and complete guidance for today. May Allah Ta'ala give us tawfiq to accept and understand and implement it in our lives.